Today I'm taking a look at a big boy tool, the Festool Domino XL, the DF 700. This sustainer here contains the Domino XL. We'll take a look at that in just a minute. And over here we'll also take a look at the dominoes that you can buy. These kits include a variety of sized dominoes, both the 12 and 14 millimeter cutters and dominoes, and an 8 and 10 millimeter pack here. Dominoes also now come in these long versions here that you can cut yourself in your shop to the length that you need. We'll check that out as well. I'm very excited to check out the DF 700 because I love my original domino, the DF 500. I've used it in a variety of projects and it makes things go really fast and efficient. In fact, I used it in a small side table project and I cut all the joinery for that table in less than 45 minutes. Now, if you're not familiar with what a domino does, it cuts mortises in your workpiece. And then you can purchase tenons, slip tenons, to fit into those mortises. So instead of a traditional mortise and tenon, you create two mortises and they fit exactly the tenons you can buy from Festool. Slip tenon fits into those two mortises and that's how you can create a really strong joint. Let's go ahead and check out what's inside included with the DF 700. Inside the sustainer, of course, have the manual. We've got power cord, plug it power cord. The DF 700 itself sits kind of diagonally in the sustainer. Also are these really handy boxes. There's two of them and these are for storing different types of dominoes on the fly here in the sustainer. Beneath those are a large support piece for supporting larger work pieces. And then optionally there's the trim stop, and this is for supporting smaller work pieces like long rails that are kind of smaller in width, and also cross stops, again optional, and these are for doing repeated mortises at some set distance so if you're doing a big row of them you can use those. And of course there's a little handy wrench for changing the bits, and speaking of bits, they're stored on the top here. And the DF 700 comes with a 12 millimeter, and it can also work with 8, 10, and 14 millimeter bits. You can order the Domino XL with or without the trim stop and the cross stop, so double check which kit you're going to order. Now if you get the kit with these stops, they're going to ship inside the sustainer along with the domino. Now these stops, the trim stop and the cross stops, are the exact same ones that come with the DF 500. So if you already have them with the DF 500, no need to order them again. The ones you have will also work with the DF 700. I don't cover the use of these stops in this video, but if you're interested in more information about them, check out online, or the DF 500 video from Highland Woodworking has more information about using these. So there is the DF 700, and it is just an awesome beast of a tool. Now this ships with a handy safety device right here which stops the tool from plunging, so as it's shipped in this kind of orientation in the sustainer, it's not plunging down. So we first want to remove that, and as I'm removing that, I'll show you the easiest way to get rid of that, and also I'll go ahead and add the bit at the same time, which comes as I showed you in the sustainer, and we'll go ahead and thread that onto the 700 here. So to do that, what I first want to do is release the front from the tool itself. That's how you go ahead and change the bits, and it's also an easy way to disengage that safety device. So you just reach your wrench under here and lift up on this tab, and you hear audible click, and the two halves are now disengaged, and you can go ahead and pull the motor off of the front assembly. Now of course it's really easy to just pop off this plastic device there, and I'm going to go ahead and store that. For one, I'm going to store and move my tool around, so I'll keep that handy. Now of course we want to thread on the 12 millimeter bit onto the front of the tool. It's really straightforward. These threads, go ahead and just thread it on there. Now once you start getting it close to all the way on, you're going to want to lock the spindle. Now I'm turning the motor as well as the bit in the front, so the spindle lock is right here on this side, this green button. So you go ahead and press that, grab the wrench while holding the spindle lock. There it goes in, turn a little bit, now it's all the way depressed, spindle's locked, and I can go ahead and tighten down my bit. Now that I've got my bit on, let's go ahead and put the tool back together. You want to first engage one of the rods there on the back side, slide that in, and then line up the rod on the front, and then you simply push it together until it clicks. There it goes, and now it's all together, and now we can do some good plunging action. Let me go ahead and show you around all the other adjustments that you can find on the tool. Now at its core, the Domino is a tool that has a spinning, oscillating bit that protrudes out of the front, and this is what creates the mortise in your workpiece. First thing I want to show you is setting the fence angle, or the angle of that mortise, and you can do that with this fence here on top. Simply release the lever here, and now you can lower or raise this fence to a variety of angles, everywhere from 0 to 90. Now it has positive stops at 22.5, 45, 67.5, and 90 degrees. So a lot of the time I'm going to be typically right at the 90 for perfectly square workpieces where I just want to protrude straight in. Then you go ahead and lock down this lever, and now you've got that fence angle set. The next adjustment I want to make is a height adjustment for this fence. A lot of times I want to put a mortise right in the center of a workpiece, and so I want to set the fence to the correct height so that when I put the tool up on the fence and protrude the bit, it's going to be hitting in the center of my workpiece. So to set that height, go ahead and loosen a knob here on the back, and then I can raise and lower this fence. Now there are a lot of preset set stops here, again right on the front. It's a little stepped stop, and you can read the numbers. So if I know my workpiece here is about 50 millimeters high, I can set the preset stop to 25 millimeters, run the fence all the way down against that stop, lock it in. Now when I go ahead and set it up on here and protrude it, I can see that the bit is coming out right about in the center of my workpiece. Now, a lot of times you don't have to get exactly in the center. I definitely recommend using the stops rather than using the scale. There's also a handy scale that you can use to set the height. So you could dial it in at exactly 25.5, or 26 or 27 using the scale and just lock it down. But if you can, try to use the stops, because when you come back and you forgot to do a mortise, or you got one more workpiece to do, it's going to be much easier to hit that stop and use the stops on the tool rather than trying to, by eye, line up back to 32 millimeters. So go ahead and use the stops when you can. The next thing I want to set is my depth adjustment, how deep of a mortise I want to make, how far that bit is going to protrude. And that is set right here with this little dial, so I can set that to say 30 millimeters. And now when I push it out, it's going to stop at 30 millimeters. Or I can set it back to say 60 millimeters, and now go ahead and protrude out to 60 millimeters. The min and max on this depth is 15 millimeters all the way up to 70 millimeters, which is almost 3 inches of cutting depth, and that's pretty awesome. There are also stops here to remember your settings, so you can go back and forth quickly. So you can set that to say 30 millimeters, set this one to 60 millimeters, and now you can quickly go back and forth. 30 stops there to 60, so you can remember those two settings. And finally, we can set the mortise width with this switch right here. There's 2 positions. In the forward position here, it's a tight fit. As you can see up here, we're pointing to the tighter fitting mortise. This will pretty much exactly fit the width of the tenons. And then if we flip it over to the other position now, that adds an extra 3 millimeters in width, making it a little bit looser fit so you can adjust your parts. Typically, I'll go ahead and do a tighter fit because that helps with alignment of my parts. So I know when I plunge the mortises, that's going to help the pieces line up exactly where I want them to be. However, if I'm doing multiple mortises in a single joint, I'll usually do one tight fitting one for alignment and then go ahead and switch to the looser fitting one so that pulling the parts together is going to be that much easier. Those are pretty much all the adjustments on this tool. I think it's time to fire it up. So here I've got a leg post and a rail, and this is almost 2 inches thick for, say, something like a bed frame. So I want to go ahead and butt these together like this. I want it to be flush across the top, but I want the rail to be a little bit inset from the leg. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over so I can lay it on my bench. Makes it a little bit easier to hold. So here's that joint, rail, and leg flush at the top and inset a little bit from the front. Now I can go ahead and mark where I want my domino while I'm holding these two pieces, or I could measure from the top down the same distance on both, but there's an easier way to do it. So this is the top of my rail and this is the front of my rail, and I want a mortise here on the end that is the same distance down from this top surface here on my rail and the leg. Now here on the domino there's handy indexing pins along the front. I'll pop them out using this green little tab, and I want to use this middle pin, so I'll move the other two back out of the way. And now the mortise that I create, I can rest the indexing pin right across the top here, and I know that my mortise is that distance down, and I can do the exact same thing on my leg. So now I know the mortise is the exact same distance from the top, making those top surfaces flush when I line up the two pieces. I don't care what this distance is from the indexing pin, I just know they're going to be the same. I'm going to go ahead and set the fence to 90. I've got perfectly square work pieces. I want the mortise going straight in. Now I'm going to set the height. I know my work piece is about 45 millimeters, so loosen the height, lift this up, and we'll set that to 20 millimeters, so approximately right in the center of my workpiece. Drop that down to the stop and lock it in. And now in terms of the depth, I'm going to use a 100 millimeter tenon by 14 millimeter bit. And so I'm going to go ahead and plunge 70 into the rail and 30 into my leg. So I'll go back to the 70, which is the max depth here for my rail. I've now got my fence height and depth all set. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the power cord and attach the dust collection right here at the front. Add the 27 millimeter hose there, and I got all my protection on, and I think I'm ready to go. So there it is, no mess, no fuss, and a really nice mortise. Now this is a pretty wide rail, so I'm going to go ahead and add another tenon here. We could even probably get a couple more, but I'll just go ahead and add one for now. I'm going to use the indexing pin again to get my next hole, but I'm going to put the indexing pin in this hole. That will create another mortise right over here. Now the first time we did it, this will be our referenced one. This is a tight fit, but now I want to get the second one to be a little bit looser fit, so I'll go ahead to the knob over here, switch it over to the looser fit for our second tenon. Now for the leg, I want to use the indexing pin from the other side, so I'll move this one out of the way, pop out these three, and just get the one that I want, that one there. And of course I need to set my depth to 30. I want to get 30 instead of 70. And then finally I'll get the fence down to 90 there, but I also want to set the height. And the height, I want to do a little bit of an offset this time, right? I don't want it to be flush. So the height of the fence, I'm going to go ahead and change over to 25, and that'll give us a nice 5 millimeter offset. So I'll go ahead, push that into 25, drop it against the stop, lock it in. Got my fence height, 90 degrees, got my depth set. Don't forget to set it back to the tight fit. So we're going to do our first one first, back to the tight fit, and we're ready to go. Now I'll go ahead and switch it over to the loose fit. I'll use the same pin. I'll put that pin into this hole, and we'll do our next one. So let's grab a couple of 14 millimeter by 100 dominoes and shove them in. This is the tight fitting one here. This is the top of the rail. You can see as I put that in, no gaps on either side. Whereas this one, when I put it in, you can see there's about 3 millimeters there. So it gives a little bit of wiggle room for pulling this joint together. So I'll go ahead and just tap these in. And you can see they went 70 millimeters, are really deep there into our rail. Let's go ahead and put the leg on. I'll go ahead and line it up and then drive it home here. A couple of taps here. And there's our joint flush across the top and a nice 5mm offset here on the front. So there's the Domino XL, the DF700, and honestly, I was really impressed with this tool. I've been using the smaller version of the Domino DF500 for quite a long time and just love it, but I was a little worried that this larger one is heavier, much bigger, that it would be a little unwieldy for making those mortises. But honestly, it was great. It was very easy to hold, very easy to control, slides in and out effortlessly, very much like the DF500, so I was really impressed with that. Speaking of the DF500, here it is side by side with the Domino XL, the 700. Honestly, they are so similar. Having used the 500 for a couple years, I was extremely comfortable picking up the 700 and going right away. From the fence angle and fence height, the mortise depth, the mortise width, changing the cutter, everything is just really the same. So I was already very familiar with how to use this tool. The big difference is obviously the size. The DF700 is just way bigger than the 500, and that really comes into play in the size furniture or work pieces that you're going to be using. For regular work pieces and furniture, side tables, end tables, case pieces, I found the 500 to be absolutely fine as long as you can get away with tenons that are 10mm thick. Remember, you can stack them this way or this way side by side, and they get about this long, 50mm long, then the DF500 is going to be fine. Where the 700 really comes into play are large pieces, so either big bed frames, doors, where you really need a long mortise. Remember, you can cut almost 3-inch deep mortise with this guy. That's where the DF700 really comes into play. Although you saw a few chips flying when cutting that mortise earlier, I highly recommend using the dust collector when creating mortises with the Domino XL. The DF700 works with 4 different cutter sizes, 8, 10, 12, and 14mm. The DF500 starts at 4mm, 5, 6, 8, and 10. So there's a little bit of overlap in the 8 and 10mm. However, here's the 8mm for the DF500 and the 8mm for the 700. And you can see, obviously, they're the same thickness, 8mm. However, look at the depth of tenons. You can get, here's a 10mm for the DF500. Here's a 10mm for the 700. And here you can see the 2 cutters side by side. These are both 8mm cutters, one for the DF500 this long, and here's the DF700 that long. So while there's overlap, the difference is really in the depth. And then obviously the 700 also works with 12mm and 14mm thick tenons, which get really, really beefy. Now, the other thing about the 700 is you can get tenon stock that is almost 2.5 feet in length, so you can cut it to exactly the length that you need. So you can grab a bunch of these in really long lengths, almost 2.5 feet, and then just cut them to the length that you need for your tenons. A quick tip on dry fitting with dominoes, as you saw me do with the sample here. These dominoes are very tight and you'll quickly ruin them trying to pull them back out to actually glue them in if you're going to do a dry fit. So what I've done is created a bunch of dominoes that I've sanded down the edges and the sides just a little bit, making them easier to fit in, and then I just grab a Sharpie and blacken them, and I've got these, in whatever sizes I need, and I just hold on to these blackened ones to do all my dry fits before I put back in the real ones for the glue up. You saw how easy and fast it was. Just create a couple of mortises. I didn't have to measure or mark anything, and boom, my project is going together. But one of the best things I love about the Domino is that I cut all my work pieces exactly to length. I don't have to worry about adding on a tenon, how big the tenon is going to be, and adding that to my work pieces. I cut everything exactly to length, a couple of mortises, and the slip tenon, and boom, everything's going together. So if you work with larger projects, larger pieces of wood, I would definitely check out this larger version, the DF700.